This is the Music Halls of Fame podcast, episode number 40. This week, we honor the year 2007 along with a member of the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame class of 2007. We also look at the case for putting Will Smith into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame for the first time next year, and our Spotlight Museum is the Smithsonian National Museum of African American History and Culture in Washington, D.C. This podcast celebrates those who have been inducted into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. We'll also look at the case for certain artists to be inducted into the Hall who aren't there yet. Plus, every week we'll discuss a different musical Hall of Fame, Walk of Fame, or museum and celebrate someone who's been inducted into them. Let's start with our main focus of the podcast, which is the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. The Hall Foundation was established on April 20th, 1983. Former Atlantic Records chairman Ahmet Ertegun was the head of the foundation at the time. 3 years later, a committee chose Cleveland, Ohio to be the site of the physical location for the museum over Detroit, Michigan, New York City, Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, Memphis, Tennessee, and Cincinnati, Ohio. I say physical location because members have actually been inducted into the hall since 1986, before the building was even opened. Cleveland was chosen because of what DJ Alan Freed did to promote rock and roll, including mainstreaming the phrase rock and roll, which was originally black slang for sex, and for also holding the first rock and roll concert. Ground was broken for the building on June 7, 1993. It opened on September 1, 1995 at 1100 Rock and Roll Boulevard on the shore of Lake Erie. The hall gets over 400,000 visitors a year on average. Normal hours of operation are between 10 a.m. to 5 p.m. except for Thursdays when they're open until 9 p.m. They are normally open later in the summer months. General admission at the moment is $30. Children 6 through 12 are $20. College students, first responders, military members, and Northeast Ohio residents are $25, and kids 5 and under, Hall of Fame members, and Cleveland residents are free. ID is required to get the discounts. Rockhall.com is their website. That's rockhall.com. And as with all places these days due to COVID restrictions, check with the website for updated information and hours. The year was 2007. The average cost of a new house was $313,600. Average income for the year was $50,823, and a gallon of gas cost $3.38. It was the year that the majority of presidential candidates in America announced their intention to run, including 3 senators named Clinton, McCain, and Obama. Kevin Rudd became Prime Minister of Australia. Romania and Bulgaria joined the European Union. Russia cut oil supplies to Europe over a dispute. The oil flowed only a few days later, but the tactic would be used over and over and over and over and over again. The Iraq War was still in full swing as truck bombs and other improvised explosive devices killed scores of soldiers and civilians alike. Great Britain ended their military deployment in Northern Ireland. North Korea agreed to abandon its nuclear program in exchange for humanitarian aid, and then, of course, they reneged on the deal, which would also happen over and over and over and over and over again. A mass shooter killed 32 people at Virginia Tech University. Another one killed 8 people at a shopping mall in Omaha, Nebraska. British youngster Madeleine McCann disappeared while on vacation in Portugal. Her case became a media sensation and has yet to officially been solved. Greece felt the effects of climate change as a heat wave killed 11 people and wildfires destroyed scores of property and acreage. TAM Airlines Flight 3054 overshot the runway in Sao Paulo, Brazil, and slammed into a building and nearby gas facility, killing all 187 people on the plane and another 12 people in the building. An 8.0 earthquake in Peru killed over 500 people. A cyclone killed over 15,000 people in Bangladesh. After 81 years and 244 days old, Queen Elizabeth passed Queen Victoria as the oldest ever reigning British monarch. As of this particular moment, she is still reigning. The country of Mauritania became the last country to finally declare slavery to be a crime. Words that were coined in 2007 include hashtag, netbook, and tweep, which has never ever entered my vocabulary ever. People who unfortunately passed away in 2007 include Pakistani Prime Minister Benazir Bhutto, who was assassinated during a rally, Russian President Boris Yeltsin, Libyan Prime Minister Mohammed Osman Said, South African President Marius Viljoen, Japanese Prime Minister Kiichi Kawazawa, First Lady Lady Bird Johnson, Afghanistan King Mohammed Zahir Shah, Colombian President Alfonso Lopez Michelson, United Nations Secretary General Kurt Waldheim, professional wrestler Chris Benoit, who killed his entire family before killing himself, model Anna Nicole Smith, actors Yvonne DiCarlo, Betty Hutton, Barry Nelson, Jane Wyman, Deborah Kerr, and Joey Bishop, film producer Carlo Ponti, film director Ingmar Bergman, television host and entrepreneur Merv Griffin. The tabloid-loving hotel owner nicknamed the Queen of Mean for her treatment of her staff, Leona Helmsley. Mime extraordinaire Marcel Marceau, adventurer Steve Fawcett, astronaut Wally Schirra, writers Art Buchwald and Ian Smith and Norman Mailer, screenwriter Sidney Sheldon, historian Arthur Schlesinger, and stuntman extraordinaire Mr. Evel Knievel. The Nobel Peace Prize was shared between the United Nations Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change and former U.S. Vice President Al Gore for their efforts to bring attention to climate change. Russian President Vladimir Putin was named Time Magazine's Person of the Year. Matt Damon was named People Magazine's Sexiest Man Alive, and Charlize Theron was named Esquire Magazine's Sexiest Woman Alive. In technology, on January 9th, 2007, Steve Jobs walked out on stage, said the magic words, "It's a phone, a music player, and a camera, all in one. Are you getting it?" and announced the first iPhone to the world, changing the phone industry and the world forever. Tumblr was launched in 2007, as was Airbnb, Zynga, Dropbox, Indiegogo, Weebly, and Google Street View, which I cannot live without. The business.com website domain was sold for $345 million. Acer bought Gateway Computers, and Google purchased DoubleClick for $3.1 billion. Amazon Music was released, as was Bandcamp, Microsoft Excel, and Adobe Lightroom. The netbook was introduced. Google released Android late in the year, along with Amazon releasing the first Kindle in time for the holiday shopping season. In video games, it was a huge year. First, the Call of Duty franchise took a more modern turn with Call of Duty 4 Modern Warfare. You also had brand new franchises with the release of the first Assassin's Creed video game, the first BioShock video game, the first Crackdown video game, also Crysis, Mass Effect, Portal, Rock Band, Skate, The Darkness, The Witcher, and Uncharted, all debuting in 2007. The number one movie of 2007 was Pirates of the Caribbean at World's End. Other big movies for the year include Harry Potter and the Order of the Phoenix, Spider-Man 3, Shrek the Third, Transformers, Ratatouille, I Am Legend, The Simpsons movie, National Treasure Book of Secrets, and 300. This is Sparta! The movie that actually won Best Picture that year was No Country for Old Men, which also won Joel and Ethan Coen the Best Director Award. Shockingly, the very popular soundtrack for that movie did not win Best Song or Best Score. Those awards actually went to Falling Slowly from Once for Best Song and Atonement for Best Film Score. Daniel Day-Lewis won Best Actor for There Will Be Blood. I drank your milkshake. I drank it up. Also, Marion Cotillard for Best Actress for Le Vive en Rose. Javier Bardem for Best Supporting Actor for No Country for Old Men. Call it friendo. And Tilda Swinton for Best Supporting Actress for Michael Clayton, which starred George Clooney, who was up for Best Actor for the year but lost out. In television, the Writers Guild of America went on strike, leaving network television to do reruns during the fall and winter TV seasons. Bob Barker hosted the game show The Price is Right for the last time. Also hosting on television for the last time was radio DJ Don Imus, whose simulcast of his radio show was broadcasted on MSNBC. He was taken off the air and later lost his contract with CBS Radio after he called members of the Rutgers University female basketball team, quote, nappy-headed hoes, end quote. The top TV shows for the year included 2 nights of American Idol, 3 nights of Dancing with the Stars, CSI, Grey's Anatomy, House, Desperate Housewives, CSI Miami, Sunday Night Football, Without a Trace, and Deal or No Deal. At the Primetime Emmy Awards for the year, 30 Rock won Best Comedy and The Sopranos won Best Drama. In sports, the International Olympic Committee awarded Sochi, Russia, the 2014 Winter Olympics for that year. The New York Giants won the Super Bowl, which was held for the 2007 season in Arizona. The halftime entertainment was Tom Petty and the Heartbreakers. LSU won the NCAA College Football Championship. The Boston Red Sox won baseball's World Series. The Florida Gators won the NCAA Men's College Basketball Championships. Tennessee won the NCAA Women's College Basketball Championships. The San Antonio Spurs won the NBA Championship, and the Phoenix Mercury won the WNBA Championship. Street Sense won the Kentucky Derby, Curlin won the Preakness Stakes, and Rags to Riches won the Belmont Stakes, therefore no Triple Crown that year. Alberto Contador won the Tour de France in cycling. In hockey, the Anaheim Ducks won the Hockey Stanley Cup, and the Rochester Nighthawks won the Major Indoor Lacrosse League. In golf, Zach Johnson won the Masters Golf Tournament. Padraig Harrington beat Sergio Garcia in a playoff to win the British Open. Angel Cabrera won the U.S. Open, and Tiger Woods won the PGA Championship. On the ladies' side, Morgan Pressel, at almost 19 years old, became the youngest female to win a major championship when she won the Kraft Nabisco Championship. Also, Suzanne Pedersen won the LPGA Championship. Christy Kerr won the U.S. Women's Open, and Lorena Ochoa won the Women's British Open. In tennis, Victoria Azarenka won the Australian Open, Maria Sharapova won the French Open, and Serena Williams won both Wimbledon and the U.S. Open. On the men's side, Novak Djokovic won the Australian Open, Rafael Nadal won the French Open, Roger Federer won Wimbledon, and Andy Murray won the U.S. Open. In soccer, Sevilla won the UEFA Cup, and AC Milan won the Champions League. In National Soccer League Championships, Manchester United won in England, Real Madrid won in Spain, Lyon won in France, Inter Milan won in Italy, Stuttgart won in Germany, and Houston won America's MLS Cup. In motorsports, Jimmy Johnson won the NASCAR Championship, Kimi Räikkönen won the Formula One Championship, Sebastian Bourdais won the Champ Car Championship, and Dario Franchitti won the IndyCar Championship. Football's Tom Brady and golf's Lorena Ochoa were the Associated Press Male and Female Athletes of the Year, respectively. In music, the Live Earth concerts were held in 9 different cities. Jordan Sparks won American Idol. Speaking of American Idol, the best-selling album that year was American Idol alumni Chris Daughtry's first album. Also among the more popular albums and artists that year were Beyoncé, Kanye, Taylor Swift's first album, Jay-Z, Linkin Park, another American Idol alum, Carrie Underwood, Justin Timberlake, Gwen Stefani, Nickelback, the Hannah Montana soundtrack, and the High School Musical 2 soundtrack. Daughtry actually outsold all of those. Seriously. Such was the power of American Idol back in the day. These days, not so much. The top single of the year was Irreplaceable by Beyoncé. Other top singles were Rihanna and Jay-Z with Umbrella, Ella, Ella, A. Gwen Stefani and Akon with The Sweet Escape. Fergie, the Duchess of Pop, with Big Girls Don't Cry. T-Pain and Young Jock with Buy You a Drank. Carrie Underwood with Before He Cheats. Plain White T's with Hey There Delilah. Akon and Snoop Dogg with I Wanna Love You. Nelly Furtado with Say It Right. Fergie and Ludacris with Glamorous. And Akon with Don't Matter. Artists who unfortunately passed away in 2007 include Ike Turner, jazz pianist Oscar Peterson, Michael Brecker, Alice Coltrane, Denny Doherty of the Mamas and the Papas, Frankie Lane, Indonesian singer Chrissy, Kitty Carlisle, cellist Miroslav Rostropovich, Izumi Sakai of Zard, Mexican singer Antonio Aguilar, saxophonist Boots Randolph, opera singers Luciano Pavarotti and Regine Crespin, singer Greth Kausland, composer Karl-Heinz Stockhausen, Macedonian singer Tosi Proski, Polish musician Witold Kiltyka, Carol Bruce, Lee Hazelwood, composer Giancarlo Menotti, and jazz percussionist Max Roach. At the Eurovision Singing Contest, which was held in Helsinki, Finland that year, Serbia won for the song Molitva. At the Tony Awards, Spring Awakening won Best Musical, and Company won Best Revival of a Musical. The 2007 class of the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame only had artists inducted into the performers category, as no one met the criteria for any of the other categories. The Ronettes, Patti Smythe, the first hip-hop act to make it into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, Grandmaster Flash and the Furious Five, and R.E.M. were all inducted into the performers category. This next group was also inducted. The band Van Halen changed the game in a couple of ways. First, they were a California hair band before there was such a thing as a hair band. Second, their guitarist, Eddie Van Halen, is considered one of the greatest guitarists of all time, and definitely excited the music industry like no other guitarist had since Jimi Hendrix. The band itself has 4 chapters. Chapter 1 started in California. Eddie and his brother, drummer Alex Van Halen, started a band in the mid-1960s called the Broken Crumbs. It was originally Eddie on drums and Alex on guitar, but Alex liked the drums more, so they switched instruments, which changed guitar history forever. They got popular on the local front, changed their name to the Trojan Rubber Company, because why not? And then they broke up. In 1972, the brothers formed another band and called it Genesis, even though there was another more famous band at the time named Genesis, but, details. They eventually changed their name to Mammoth before finally settling on Van Halen. Mark Stone played bass guitar, but was soon replaced by a local guy who played in the band Snake named Michael Anthony. They were renting a sound system from a guy who they auditioned for lead singer at that point, but didn't pass the audition. But later, they figured out that it was far better to just let the guy sing because they wouldn't have to rent the sound system from him, thus saving him a bunch of money, or at least saving them a bunch of money. That guy, by the way, was David Lee Roth. The band played gigs in the Los Angeles area and especially on the famed Sunset strip clubs. They first were noticed by Gene Simmons of Kiss, who tried to get them signed but was told repeatedly that the band would never make it. In 1977, they were signed finally to Warner Brothers Records after a couple of Warner execs went to see the band perform at the Starwood Club in Hollywood. From their debut self-titled album to their sixth album, 1984, the band solidified its spot in rock music history. With the showmanship of Diamond Dave, the virtuosity of Eddie's guitar, Michael's pounding bass, and Alex's thunder drums, the band cranked out hits like Jump, Running with the Devil, Everybody Wants Some, Ice Cream Man, Panama, and so many more. Their live performances became legendary. Their problems actually started around their third album, with Eddie wanting to move away from the good time songs and do more meaningful work. The group also started using more synthesizers, especially on the 1984 album. David went off and did Vegas-style music with the kitschy remake of California Girls and I Ain't Got Nobody with Just a Gigolo. Finally, things came to a full boil, and David was out of the band. He went on to find his own guitar virtuoso in the legendary Steve Vai, and together they put out a couple of hit solo albums like Yankee Rose. And that was the end of the band, or at least chapter 1. Normally, a band losing a popular lead singer would kill a normal band, but the band had another chapter when the Red Rocker himself, Sammy Hagar, came on board. That was after Daryl Hall of Hall & Oates and Patti Smythe of the band Scandal both turned down the lead singer spot. Could you imagine Daryl Hall of Hall & Oates being the lead singer of Van Halen? Wow, that would have been weird. Sammy, by the way, already had a successful solo career going at the time with hits like I Can't Drive 55, Where Eagles Fly, and Three Lock Box. The band didn't even miss a beat with Sammy. Sammy's first album with the band was the 1986 album 5150, which had huge hits like Why Can't This Be Love, Dreams, and Love Walks In. The group then followed that up with OU812, with the hits When It's Love and Finish What You Started. Their next album was For Unlawful Carnal Knowledge, which is, of course, an acronym. You can figure that one out. With the hits Pound Cake and Right Now. The 1995 album Balance finished off the Sammy Hagar chapter, but before then, all of the other Hagar albums were huge hits, winning awards and selling millions of records. Hagar abruptly left the group in 1996. Hagar would later say that Eddie's personal problems were a big reason, as Eddie was continuously fighting alcoholism at the time. David came back briefly to record a couple of new tracks for a greatest hits album, and there was talk at the time of a reunion, but then the fighting started again before anything else came of it, and, well, that was that. Former lead singer for the band Extreme, Gary Cherone, would enter the next chapter of the band, and together they put out the album Van Halen 3, which crashed and burned. That era with Gary Cherone lasted from 1996 to 1999. Van Halen went on hiatus for a few years, but opened up a new chapter by bringing Sammy back for a reunion tour in 2003. That reunion was short-lived, though, as Eddie's alcoholism had gotten way out of control, according to recent interviews that Sammy has given. Michael Anthony was abruptly fired in 2006 and replaced on bass by Eddie's son, Wolfgang. At that point, guess who showed back up to open up the next chapter? Diamond David Lee Roth, who was back with the band until the very end in 2019 when they announced the breakup of the band. Unbeknownst to anyone, Eddie was being treated for cancer, and it had begun to take its toll, which was why the band stopped touring and broke up. In early 2020, a call was placed between Eddie and Sammy where they mended their friendship. They dismissed doing any sort of announcement about the call because the fans and the media would have started rumors of yet another tour or some more discord with David when there really wasn't any. It was that Eddie was towards the end of his life. Eddie's inner circle also knew he didn't have much time to even consider another tour because they knew that time was short. And they were right. On October 6, 2020, the untimely death of Eddie Van Halen occurred as he passed away from cancer. Eddie was 65 years old. When the band was inducted into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, the only members who showed up to accept the award were the two members who were no longer in the band at that time, Sammy and Michael, who had started a band called Chickenfoot and then a new one called The Circle. Sammy has his own clubs called the Cabo Wabo Clubs, and he has his own music interview show on Access Television. After the demise of Van Halen, Wolfgang started his own band. David and Alex are in retirement, although David has floated the idea of doing some sort of a reunion, but as of now, that has not come to pass. Presented for induction by the band Velvet Revolver, Van Halen, inducted into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, class of 2007. Before we look at this week's case for putting an artist into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, let's look and see exactly how artists are normally inducted into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. The criteria for being inducted into the Hall was originally that, quote, artists had to have had released their first record 25 years earlier and have created music whose originality, impact, and influence has changed the course of rock and roll, end quote. That interpretation has been updated in recent decades to include music that rock and roll influenced, like reggae, country, and hip-hop, and also youth culture that music has influenced and vice versa. That's why hip-hop artists get to be inducted now. The different categories that people can be inducted for are for musical excellence, which is for artists, musicians, songwriters, and producers who have had a dramatic impact on music. Also, early influencers, artists whose music influenced rock and roll and youth culture like jazz and the blues. The Ahmet Ertegun Award is also given out, which is named for famed record executive Ahmet Ertegun and goes to a non-performer who has had an impact in music, like record executives and managers. There's also a category that inducted songs that have influenced music, like the Troggs' Wild Thing or Sam the Sham and the Pharaohs' Wooly Bully. But of course, the most popular category is the performer category, which has had everybody in it from Elvis Presley to Tina Turner. The different nominating committees decide who will make the official ballots for that year. Then the ballots are sent to 1,000 musicologists, executives, performers, and other experts. The fans also get a chance to vote, with that vote usually being held on the Hall's website, rockhall.com. Then from that, the final inductees are chosen. Now, with all that being said, let us look at the case for this week's entry. A couple of weeks ago, we started looking at the case for inducting different artists who are eligible for induction into the class of 2023 for the first time. We started with Destiny's Child, who we thought would eventually get in, but probably not in the first year. We then looked at Missy Elliott, who we thought would probably not make it into the performers category, but maybe one of the other categories like LL Cool J and Judas Priest did. This week, we're going to look at Will Smith's solo work. We are not going to include his work as a part of DJ Jazzy Jeff and the Fresh Prince. So, with all that being said, to the tail of the tape we go. Will has put out 4 solo studio albums. Of those, all of them hit the top 15, with one going to number 13, one going to number 8, one going to number 6, and one going to number 5. As far as singles go, he's released 12 solo singles. Of those, 6 of those went top 25, with one going to number 7 and 3 hitting the top spot, numero uno, number 1. Now, those aren't bad stats. If you combined it with his Fresh Prince stuff, it would even be more impressive. However, aside from the fact that he's mega popular, all right, well, right up until the Academy Awards thing where he smacked insult comic Chris Rock, has he been influential? My thought is not really, although he's been one of the most popular entertainers of the past 20 years or so. Does he have a Hall of Fame career? Again, my thought is no, because he hasn't been influential, and popularity does not equate to influential, and a lot of people unfortunately confuse those two. Just because he's an actor who's had huge movies like Independence Day and Men in Black, and now an Academy Award for Best Actor, that does not mean that the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame is going to just up and hand him any sort of induction. Therefore, as much as I love his hits, Men in Black, Getting Jiggy with It, etc., I don't see any way that Will Smith will be inducted into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame anytime soon under any category. Next week, we're going to go back to looking at making the case for artists who are eligible for the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame and who have been eligible for an awfully long time now. This week's museum is the Smithsonian National Museum of African American History and Culture. The museum is located on the National Mall, right across the street from the Washington Monument. The museum highlights the experience and contributions to specifically America and, more broadly, the world. A lot of the museum deals with slavery and civil rights. There's a slave cabin, an airplane that was flown by a member of the Tuskegee Airmen, as well as items pertaining to the military, religion, literature, and politics of African Americans. The museum also has an extensive collection of artifacts concerning music. The museum boasts Chuck Berry's Pink Cadillac, stage costumes worn by Parliament Funkadelics, among many others, along with other recordings, sheet music, photos, and such. And there is also a really, really good online resource on their website, where they've put a lot of their collection online for people to look at, especially during the pandemic back in 2020. The museum is open daily from 10 a.m. to 5:30 p.m. Admission is free. After all, your tax dollars paid for it. However, the only way that you can walk into the museum without a pass is if you show your military ID. Otherwise, you either have to try to get time passes in the morning if you want to go, which run out very quickly as people actually wait online for those, even in the middle of winter, or you can get passes in advance online. Check the museum's website, nmaahc.si.edu, otherwise known as National Museum of African American History and Culture, www.smithsonianinstitution.education for information about the time passes along with COVID admission information, since the COVID regulations, especially in Washington, D.C., seem to change on a whim these days. Rosetta Rubin was born on March 20th, 1915 in Cotton Plant, Arkansas, to Katie Bell Newbin. At least that's the official story of her birth. Some researchers also think that her name is Rosetta Atkins, and she was born to Katie Harper. Not much is known about her father except that he was a singer. What is definitely known is that Rosetta's mother was a singer who was also heavily involved in the church as a speaker and a preacher. She was also a feminist who encouraged women in the congregation to sing and also to teach the spiritual word in church, which was relatively unheard of in that era. Rosetta's mother had an impact directly on her daughter, both in terms of attitude and in terms of her career choice. It was her mother who introduced Rosetta to gospel music and also to the guitar at age 6. Rosetta became very proficient at playing the guitar and was, still at age 6, traveling and playing with her mother as part of a traveling ministry show. They toured the South for a few years until they moved to Chicago, Illinois. For the next decade, Rosetta and her mother toured the North, where Rosetta developed a reputation as a child prodigy. She also fell in love with, and at age 19, married a preacher who toured with them. At this point, Rosetta took her new husband's last name, Thorpe, changed a vowel, and made that her stage name as we know her today, Sister Rosetta Tharpe. At the age of 23, Rosetta started recording gospel songs for Decca Records. In fact, she recorded her first 4 gospel songs while being backed up by an orchestra. Those 4 songs, The Lonesome Road, My Man and I, Rock Me, and That's All, became big hits and turned Rosetta into a sensation. The song Rock Me became a very influential song on future rock and roll artists like Elvis Presley and Little Richard. Her song Down by the Riverside was selected for preservation at the National Recording Registry of the U.S. Library of Congress. That last sentence caused some controversy for her. At the time, it was tough being a female guitarist, as they were rare. It was even rarer when the female guitarist was black. What Rosetta did with her music, and one of the main reasons why she was finally inducted into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, was that she started combining gospel and secular music, and also started playing with secular artists in places like the Cotton Club in New York City. And that did not sit well with the gospel crowd, who started leaving her. She actually wanted to go back to mainly gospel music in 1943, but she was obligated by her contract to play more secular things. Rosetta teamed up with Marie Knight and recorded a bunch of duets and went on to tour with Marie. By the end of the 1940s, though, the partnership started to break up due to other artists like Mahalia Jackson gaining more popularity. Rosetta still kept touring and recording, even touring all over Europe, until her death from a stroke on October 9th, 1973. Rosetta's influence on rock and roll is immeasurable. She influenced pretty much all of the early rock and roll artists, especially at a concert in Manchester, England on May 7, 1964, that was said to have influenced Eric Clapton, Keith Richards, and Jeff Beck. Her use of heavy distortion in her guitar kick-started the electric blues. Also, she set the bar for female guitarists with the tenacity and determination that she inherited from her mother. And you can find photos and recordings of Sister Rosetta Tharpe at the Smithsonian National Museum of African American History and Culture in Washington, D.C. And that is it for the Music Halls of Fame podcast, episode number 40. Thanks for listening. Audio engineering and editing, video editing, writing, narration, basically everything having to do with this podcast is done by yours truly. You can find us on our website at cjbtproductions.com. Our podcast is on all of your favorite podcast providers such as Apple Music, Google Podcasts, CastBox, Spotify, etc., all under Music History Today. If you would like to support this podcast, our Patreon can be found at patreon.com/Music History Today. We are also on Twitter at Music History Day, and you can now find us on YouTube. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit that notification bell anytime you want to know exactly what videos are dropped and when. All of those links can be found in the show notes below. Thank you very, very much for listening.